On Wednesday, January the 29th, 1975, little Simon Wilson left his apartment to go to Parkfield School just as he did every day. Simon that day wore a green parka, brown pants, had a backpack, and wore rubber boots. Born on April 15th, 1965, Simon was a 9-year-old, 4-foot tall, and 50-pound, curly-haired blonde with brown eyes. We have no information on his family situation whatsoever. Welcome to my channel. Hi everybody, how you doing? Welcome to my channel and to an episode of Missing Kids. And today we are going to discuss another vintage case going back to 1975, the same year that other missing kid cases occurred. And so, let's get to it. Before we start, I just want to throw out a little disclaimer, and I know that I've said this elsewhere. I just want to mention that when I insert these little clips and images and visuals into these sorts of vlogs, I'm not at all trying to recreate the event itself, especially because we don't have the details of those events, do we? I'm not trying to recreate it. I'm simply trying to throw in a highlight or two just to have the viewer associate with the scenario a little easier. And that is also why I think trying to go back to the scene where it actually happened would try to make me out to be, trying to recreate the scenario. I could just as easily go back to the intersection where this crime took place. But it's better that we just speak about it on a very hypothetical basis and not try to recreate anything, because I really want to respect the family and the loved ones who are missing these vanished children. And I'm going to leave it at that. Fortunately, on January 29th, that Wednesday, Simon never actually made it to school. And so he vanished in the same area where little 9-year-old Richard Marlowe actually vanished decades before him. And in the same year that 5-year-old Tracy Bruni vanished near my old school. Next day, on Thursday, January the 30th, 1975, the childhood innocence of the Parkwood community was forever lost. And that morning, the radio announced that Simon Wilson vanished on his way to school the previous day. After 9-year-old Simon Wilson was reported missing in January of 1975, police officers and volunteers explored Etobicoke, that's the west part of my city, explored the sewer tunnels and searched Mimico Creek. The immediate area around Simon's apartment had some sort of feature built in for storms. But these storm sewers were not very well secured, where children were unfortunately known to play very frequently. And newspapers had they carry pictures of police with tracking dogs and city works personnel that searched those sewer tunnels after little Simon went missing. More than a dozen police officers searched the shallow waters of Mimico Creek on January the 31st, 1975, behind the apartment building on Willowbridge Drive, Etobicoke, where Simon Wilson, 9 years old, was last seen. At school, police cars were in the parking lot, lined up by the scores, and teachers and students, children, everyone looked so concerned. Some of them did not know exactly what was going on yet, and so there was a little chaos. Everyone was in shock. Throughout that Thursday, the next day, Simon's classmates and friends were all called to the Principal Morrison's office, where Vice Principal Guardhouse asked and questioned the students, and so did detectives. They spoke with the students, and they made sure that the students, mostly little children, answered the questions, knew what the questions were about, and knew who the student was, which student was being talked about and being searched for. I think they took very great care not to try to soften the blow of this traumatic experience, traumatizing for both family and school chums and teachers. I'm sure the teachers there, just like family, were so upset and distraught, and maybe a lot of them needed counseling too. Over the next week, following Simon's disappearance, his neighborhood was filled again with police cars and police and volunteers. A very heavy heart froze that neighborhood, however, and that school as well, paralyzed it with fear, as the notion of the world as a very dangerous place began to become very clear. Parents started to drive their children to and from school, very unusual in an area where all children had previously walked freely and safely. Police Mounties searched the streets, parks, and ravines. Police and volunteers knocked on doors asking to search properties. And so, for instance, if you were a neighbor who lived close by to the apartment complex, you probably would have had a knock on the door asking for your premises to be searched. Not that people were probably going to abduct a child, but you never know. If he might have fallen somewhere, nobody would have known where he was, right? So I think that's the spirit under which this investigation was conducted. During these searches, the police found a suitcase filled with food and drinks which had been left for Simon. Why? When? And by whom? But the article doesn't really give any other information. Did somebody come forward with that information, or was it a campaign to simply leave food out just in case Simon was somewhere about, wandering around lost or hurt or with amnesia? I don't know why or specifically or when that food got put there, but it was there. Curiously, Simon was reportedly heard shouting in the sewers, though it has never been confirmed as being Simon. So, who was doing the shouting and why? That never became clear at all. And so, does this sound like a planted red herring? I don't know. regarding what actually happened, this sort of shouting, could very well suggest that Simon also heard something similar and was lured there while he was walking to school. So he was lured into the sewers, maybe? I don't know. That he simply wandered in there to play before school and got hurt. It does seem very illogical to me that Simon, at close to 10 years old, would stop off to play there on his way to school. And as conniving and, mischievous some little boys can be, I remember at that age, I would never have thought to linger on my way to school or play somewhere or become distracted. Maybe at 6 or 7. Yeah, I could see a child doing that at 6 or 7 years old, but not at 10 years old. Close to 10 years old. So, yeah, I'm having problem with that theory. There were other rumors, and one was that a relative might have kidnapped him and taken him out of Canada. And so adults began to discreetly discuss where he might have gone and what might have actually happened to poor Simon. It must have been something horrendous. And so these things were not blurted right out in school, but I know that adults that were in Simon's everyday life really began to try to formulate these sorts of theories, because it was quite unlike him to simply take off for an adventure and not report home to anybody. We don't know what happened. It does seem quite out of character for this particular little boy to have simply vanished on his way to school. Another theory is that, and this one's weird, it's a weird coincidence, and it's almost impossible to imagine that it's only a coincidence. Get this, guys. That year, or very soon after, I'm not sure which, another theory is that a murdered child, right within his own block, his own street block, probably within the same apartment complex and same school, was murdered by her own mom's boyfriend. And get this, with an ashtray right on the head. If that isn't one sign of horrific child abuse, I don't know what is. Why a coincidence? Well, her name was Jacqueline Wilson. So far, detectives have not been able to come up with a very physical link between the two children. They were not related, but the key concept here is that there was a child abuser, and I don't know what else, a child abuser and child murderer living right among them in the neighborhood. I am sure those students from that school really needed counseling that year. Can you imagine coming across such two traumatic events? Two of your schoolmates are now gone. One is missing and one murdered by a supposed alleged family member in each case. And so we don't have any evidence that Simon has ever transpired, although it's pretty probable that he did pass on. So I'm just saying that we have no evidence whatsoever what might have happened to Simon. And so, as it goes, no trace of Simon Wilson has ever been found to this day in 2024. On February the 5th, 1975, the search for Simon Wilson was called off. It was ended. Regardless of what actually happened, Simon seemed to fall right off the face of the earth. A school friend who recently inquired was told by a detective that Simon's file is indeed still open and has been reviewed very recently, as recent as 2022. And so the friend also discovered that the police never do close a missing persons case until they know exactly what happened. And so the ultimate goal for, family and friends and all of us would be to try to search for a key piece of information that could lead to the reopening of this case, to the police reprioritizing the investigation once again, because we still are absolutely at odds with any of these theories. We don't know what happened. We have to know what happened. And just as in every other missing child case, we want to jog people's memories. Maybe you were a child, maybe you weren't around in 1975, or maybe you were a child who can remember back to 1975 if you were indeed a part of that community at that time, and remember anything suspicious that occurred during that day in January, that Wednesday in 1975. The best thing to do would be to alert the authorities. And so, thank you so much for listening and watching. I hope you enjoyed listening to the facts of the case that belong to the disappearance of little Simon Wilson in 1975.